I've spent almost 20 years hauling freight across the United States. In that time, I've driven through blizzards, dust storms, blackouts, and roads so empty they felt forgotten by the world. But nothing compares to what happened on Route 87 in northern Wyoming. Because according to every map, every GPS record, and every state document, the town I drove through that night never existed, and the woman who warned me to leave immediately had been dead since 1989. My name is Marcus Reed. Back in 2018, I was working for a small freight company based outside Cheyenne, Wyoming. Most of my deliveries were normal. Long hours, bad coffee, endless highways. Nothing exciting. Then one October evening, my dispatcher handed me a last-minute load. The destination was a warehouse near a place called Black Hollow. I had never heard of it before. The paperwork looked old and strangely incomplete. No company logo, no contact number, just an address, a delivery code, and a note written in red ink. Deliver before sunrise. I laughed when I saw it. At the time, I thought someone was trying to be funny. A few hours later, just after midnight, I was deep in the Wyoming backcountry. The highway stretched endlessly through rolling hills and dark pine forests. There were no towns, no traffic, no lights, only my headlights cutting through the darkness. Then my GPS suddenly lost signal. The screen froze. A second later it went completely black. I tapped it twice. Nothing. That was strange. The GPS had been working perfectly all night. A few miles later, my radio began producing bursts of static. At first it was normal interference. Then I started hearing something beneath the noise. A voice, very faint, almost like someone whispering. I turned the volume down. The whispering stopped immediately. For a moment, everything was silent again. Then I saw the sign. A rusted metal sign standing beside the road. Black Hollow. 3 miles. The strange thing was that the sign looked ancient, as if it had been standing there for decades. And yet, according to my route paperwork, this was exactly where I was supposed to go. Something about it made my stomach tighten, but I kept driving. I had no idea that in less than an hour, I would be begging to get off that road alive. The road narrowed as I drove deeper into the wilderness. Tall pine trees crowded both sides of the highway, their branches hanging over the pavement like dark claws. The farther I went, the colder it became. My dashboard showed the outside temperature dropping rapidly. 42 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, 34 degrees Fahrenheit. That didn't make any sense. Just 30 minutes earlier, it had been nearly 50 degrees. I switched on the heater. Nothing happened. Only cold air blew through the vents. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Not fear. Not yet. Just the feeling that something wasn't right. A few minutes later, I noticed headlights behind me. I checked my mirrors. A vehicle was following at a distance. Its lights remained perfectly steady. No matter how fast I drove or how slow I drove, the distance never changed. For nearly 10 minutes, it stayed there, watching, following. Then the road curved around a hillside. For a few seconds, the vehicle disappeared from my mirrors. When the road straightened again, the headlights were gone. Completely gone. There were no side roads, no driveways, no places to turn off. The vehicle had simply vanished. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The silence inside the cab suddenly felt heavy. Then I saw another sign. Welcome to Black Hollow. Population, 214. The sign was covered in rust and bullet holes. Weeds had nearly swallowed its base. It looked abandoned, as if nobody had maintained it in years. I slowed down. The town appeared ahead through the darkness. A handful of buildings lined the main road. A gas station, a diner, several houses, a church. But something was wrong. Every building was dark. No lights, no cars, no people, nothing. It looked less like a town and more like a photograph of a town. Frozen, lifeless. I rolled slowly down the main street. My truck engine seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. Then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The gas station sign displayed fuel prices, but the prices were from decades ago. Regular gasoline, 89 cents. Diesel, $1.03. I stared at it for several seconds. There was no way that sign had been updated recently. Yet it looked untouched, as if time had stopped here. A sudden movement caught my eye. Someone was standing across the street. A woman. She stood beneath a flickering street lamp, motionless, watching my truck. I couldn't make out her face. Only a long dark coat and pale skin illuminated by the weak yellow light. Relieved to finally see another person, I slowed down and rolled down my window. The woman didn't wave. She didn't smile. She didn't move at all. She simply stared at me. Then she slowly raised one hand and pointed toward the road behind me, as if she wanted me to turn around immediately. Before I could say anything, every streetlight in town went dark at the same time, And when the darkness swallowed the street, the woman was gone. For several seconds, I sat frozen behind the wheel. The entire town had disappeared into darkness. Only my headlights illuminated the empty street ahead. I looked around, expecting to see the woman somewhere nearby. There was nothing. No footsteps, no movement, no sound, just silence. A silence so complete it felt unnatural. I considered turning around. The woman had clearly been trying to warn me about something. But then I remembered the delivery. I checked the paperwork again. The warehouse address was still there. Black Hollow Industrial Storage Facility. End of Main Street, half a mile ahead. I took a deep breath and continued driving. The deeper I entered the town, the stranger everything became. Every building looked abandoned. Store windows were covered in dust. Wooden porches sagged under years of neglect. Mailboxes leaned sideways. Yet there wasn't a single broken window anywhere. It was as if everyone had left overnight and never returned. Then I noticed something even stranger. Every clock I could see showed the exact same time. 1:17 a.m. A clock inside the diner. 1:17. A clock hanging in a barber shop window. 1:17. Even the church clock tower farther down the road. 1:17. None of them were moving. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. At that moment, the radio suddenly came back to life. Static exploded from the speakers. Then a voice emerged, weak and distorted. Turn around. I nearly slammed the brakes. The voice sounded like a woman. The same woman I had seen beneath the street lamp. Leave now? The transmission crackled violently. Then another voice interrupted her. This one deeper, angrier, almost growling. The speakers erupted with deafening static before going silent again. My hands were sweating now. Every instinct told me to get out of Black Hollow. But curiosity kept pushing me forward. A few minutes later, I reached the end of town. The warehouse stood alone beyond a chain-link fence. Its massive metal walls reflected my headlights. Unlike the rest of the town, the warehouse wasn't abandoned. Lights glowed inside several windows. For the first time since entering Black Hollow, I felt relieved. At least someone was here. I pulled through the open gate and parked near the loading docks. The engine rumbled to a stop. Immediately, the silence returned. I climbed down from the cab and looked around. The warehouse lights flickered constantly. On, off, as if the building itself was struggling to stay alive. Then I heard footsteps, slow footsteps, somewhere inside the warehouse. Someone was definitely in there. But the strange thing was that the footsteps never got closer. They never moved away either. They just continued at the exact same pace, walking, back and forth, inside the darkness, waiting. And for reasons I still can't explain, I suddenly knew one thing. Whatever was making those footsteps was not human. I stood beside the truck for nearly a minute, listening. The footsteps continued inside the warehouse, slow, steady, back and forth. The loading dock doors were partially open. A cold draft drifted out from the darkness beyond them. I grabbed my flashlight from the cab and walked toward the entrance. The beam cut through the darkness. Rows of shelves stretched deep into the building. Most of them were empty. Dust covered the concrete floor. Yet the footsteps continued. Somewhere ahead, I called out, "Hello?" No answer. The footsteps stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt even worse. I slowly stepped inside. My flashlight swept across stacks of old wooden crates, rusted machinery, broken pallets. Then the beam landed on something that made me stop. A wall covered in photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Every photograph showed someone standing on a road at night. Truck drivers, travelers, families, police officers. Some photos looked decades old. Others looked recent. But every single person had the same expression. Fear, pure terror. As if the picture had been taken moments before something horrible happened. My stomach tightened. Then I noticed a date written beneath one photograph. October 12, 1997. Another. June 3, 2004. Another. August 19, 2013. The dates stretched across decades. I stepped closer. And then my blood turned cold. One of the photographs was brand new. The image showed a red freight truck parked beside the Black Hollow sign. My truck. My exact truck. The photo couldn't have existed. I had arrived less than 20 minutes ago. Yet somehow it was hanging there among all the others. A sudden bang echoed through the warehouse. I spun around. One of the loading dock doors had slammed shut. Then another. Bang. A third one. Bang. Metal rattled throughout the building. The doors were closing one by one, as if something was sealing the warehouse. I rushed toward the entrance, but before I reached it, the lights overhead flickered violently. For a split second, the warehouse became completely dark. Then the lights flashed back on, and every photograph on the wall had changed. The people were gone. Now each picture showed the same thing. A tall black figure standing on an empty road, watching, waiting. Its face was nothing but darkness. Its arms hung unnaturally long at its sides, and in every photograph, it was a little closer than before. The lights flickered again. When they came back, the photographs were gone. The wall was completely empty. Then I heard a woman's voice behind me, soft, terrified. "Don't let it see you." I turned instantly, and standing at the far end of the warehouse was the same woman from the street lamp. This time I could see her clearly. Her face was pale, her clothes looked decades old, and there was dried blood running down one side of her neck. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at something behind me, something that had just entered the warehouse. I didn't turn around immediately. Something deep inside me was screaming not to. The woman stood frozen at the far end of the warehouse, her eyes locked on whatever was behind me. Her face had gone completely pale. Then she whispered again, "Don't move." Every muscle in my body tightened. The air suddenly felt heavier, colder, like the temperature had dropped 20 degrees in a matter of seconds. I could hear breathing now. Not my breathing. Something else's. Slow, deep, right behind me. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. The woman took a cautious step backward. Her eyes never left the thing standing behind me. Then she spoke. "It thinks you're one of them." "What is it?" I whispered. The woman's expression filled with terror. "You don't want to know." A low scraping sound echoed across the concrete floor. Something was moving, circling, studying me. The sound reminded me of metal dragging across stone. Slow, patient, like a predator deciding when to attack. I couldn't take it anymore. I spun around. At first, I saw nothing. Then my flashlight beam landed on a figure standing between two rows of shelves. It was impossibly tall, at least 8 feet high. Its body looked stretched, wrong, like a human silhouette pulled apart by invisible hands. Its skin was completely black, not dark, black, darker than the shadows around it. Its face had no eyes, no nose, no features, just a smooth void where a face should have been. Yet somehow I knew it was staring directly at me. The flashlight began flickering. The figure tilted its head. Then every light inside the warehouse exploded. Darkness swallowed everything. I heard shelves crashing, metal screaming, something moving at impossible speed. The woman suddenly screamed, "Run!" That single word snapped me back to reality. I turned and sprinted toward the loading docks. Behind me came the sound of pounding footsteps. Not human footsteps. These were too fast, too heavy. The entire building seemed to shake with every step. I reached the dock entrance and threw myself through the partially open door. The cold night air hit my face. I ran toward my truck. The pounding footsteps were still coming. Closer, closer. I climbed into the cab, slammed the door shut, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine hesitated. Once, twice. My heart nearly stopped. Then the truck roared to life. At that exact moment, something slammed against the passenger side door. The entire cab shook violently. I looked through the window, and for a split second, I saw it. That featureless black face pressed against the glass, watching me, smiling, even though it had no mouth. I threw the truck into gear and floored the accelerator. The tires screamed against the pavement. The truck shot forward through the warehouse gate, and in the mirror, I watched the thing stand motionless in the middle of the road, not chasing me, not moving, just watching, as if it knew something I didn't, as if escaping Black Hollow wasn't going to be that easy. The truck tore down the empty road as fast as its engine would allow. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. I kept checking the mirrors. Nothing. No headlights. No figure. No movement. For a moment, I thought I had escaped. Then the radio turned on by itself. A burst of static filled the cab. I reached for the power button. It wouldn't respond. The static continued. Then a familiar voice emerged. The woman. "Marcus, don't stop." My stomach dropped. She knew my name. I had never told her my name. The radio crackled again. "It's following you." A second later, another voice exploded from the speakers. A deep, distorted growl. The sound was so loud it made me flinch. The entire radio went dead. At the same moment, every light on my dashboard flickered. The truck engine sputtered, then recovered. I looked ahead and saw something impossible. The Black Hollow town sign. Again. "Welcome to Black Hollow. Population 214. I slammed the brakes. The truck skidded sideways. This couldn't be happening. I had been driving away from the town for nearly 15 minutes. There was no way I should be back here. Yet the sign stood right in front of me, exactly where it had been before. The same rust, the same bullet holes, the same weeds. My heartbeat thundered in my chest. I turned the truck around immediately and drove in the opposite direction. 10 minutes later, another sign appeared. "Welcome to Black Hollow. Population 214. I felt panic rising inside me. No matter which direction I drove, the road kept bringing me back. It was like the town didn't want me to leave. Then I noticed something in the distance. A light. A single yellow light shining from the second floor of an old building. Every other building remained dark. Only that one window glowed. As I got closer, I realized it was the church. The same church I had passed earlier. The woman had disappeared every time I saw her. But something told me she wanted me to find that church. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the only place in Black Hollow that still showed signs of life. Or maybe because I had no other choice. The truck rolled to a stop outside the building. The yellow light still burned in the upstairs window. The church doors stood partially open, moving slowly in the wind, creaking, back and forth, back and forth. I grabbed my flashlight. As I stepped out of the truck, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The church parking lot was filled with vehicles, dozens of them. Old cars, pickup trucks, motorcycles, even freight trucks, all covered in years of dust. And every single one had been abandoned there, as if their owners had entered the church and never come back out. I stood beside the truck for several seconds, staring at the church. The yellow light still glowed in the upstairs window. Everything else remained dark. The abandoned vehicles surrounded the building like a graveyard. Some were so old that rust had eaten through the doors. Others looked relatively new. One truck caught my attention immediately. It was a freight truck, almost identical to mine. The company logo on its door had faded with age, but it was still visible. I walked closer. The driver's side door hung open. Inside, a thick layer of dust covered the steering wheel. Yet the ignition key was still there. Whoever had driven it here had never left. A cold wind swept across the parking lot. The church doors creaked wider, almost inviting me inside. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and stepped through the entrance. The smell hit me instantly. Old wood, mold, and something else. Something faintly rotten. Rows of pews stretched across the sanctuary. Every seat was empty. At the front stood a large wooden cross. But something was wrong. The cross had been turned upside down. I stopped. My flashlight beam moved across the walls. Scratches covered the wood. Hundreds of scratches. Some deep, some shallow. As if countless people had clawed at the walls in panic. Then I noticed writing. Names. Hundreds of names. Carved into the wood. Some looked decades old. Others appeared fresh. Every wall in the church was covered with them. People who had come here. People who had never left. My pulse quickened. Then I found something that made my blood freeze. Near the front row, carved into the wood, were 3 words. Marcus Reed. My name. I stumbled backward. No, I whispered. There was no way. I had never been here before. Yet my name was already carved into the church wall. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from upstairs. Slow, heavy, not the entity. These sounded human. I aimed my flashlight toward the staircase. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned. Then a woman's voice drifted down from above. The same voice from the radio. Marcus. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. Come upstairs. The voice sounded weak, painful, almost desperate. For a moment, I considered running back to the truck. But then she spoke again, and what she said made my stomach drop. If you leave now, it will follow you forever. The church became silent once more. Outside, the wind howled through Black Hollow, and somewhere in the distance, I heard a sound that chilled me to the bone. A deep, inhuman scream. The same scream I had heard inside the warehouse. The entity was searching for me, and it was getting closer. For several seconds, I stood at the bottom of the staircase, unable to move. The woman's voice still echoed in my mind. If you leave now, it will follow you forever. Outside, the wind rattled the church windows. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the town, that thing was screaming. Getting closer, I swallowed hard and started climbing the stairs. Each step groaned beneath my weight. The second floor was darker than the sanctuary below. The yellow light came from a single oil lamp sitting on a desk, and beside that desk stood the woman. For the first time, I saw her clearly. She looked no older than 30. Her dark hair rested over one shoulder. Her clothes looked decades out of date, and there was a deep wound across the side of her neck. Not fresh. Old. Very old. She watched me silently. Then she spoke. My name is Evelyn. What is this place? I asked. What happened here? For several moments she said nothing. Then she looked toward one of the dusty windows. Black Hollow died 40 years ago. A chill ran through me. Evelyn pointed toward an old photograph hanging on the wall. The picture showed a crowded town square. Families, children, shop owners, police officers, everyone smiling. 214 people lived here. My eyes moved to the town sign in my memory. Population, 214. The exact same number. No one ever left, she continued. What do you mean? Evelyn's expression darkened. One winter night, something came out of the forest. The owl lamp flickered. The townspeople thought it was a man at first. Her voice became quieter, but it wasn't human. I felt my pulse quicken. Evelyn continued, "It could look like anyone. It could sound like anyone. It learned people's names. It learned their fears. And once it noticed you, she stopped speaking." I already knew the answer. It never stops. The church suddenly trembled. A loud crash echoed from downstairs. Both of us froze. Another crash followed. The front doors. Something had just entered the church. Heavy footsteps echoed below. Slow, deliberate, not hiding anymore, not searching anymore. It knew exactly where I was. Evelyn's face lost all color. "It's here?" The footsteps began climbing the stairs, one step at a time. Thump, thump, thump. The wooden staircase groaned under the weight. Yet whatever was climbing sounded far heavier than any human. I backed away from the doorway. The footsteps continued. Closer, closer. Then Evelyn grabbed my arm. Her hand felt ice cold. When I looked into her eyes, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for me. And then she revealed the truth. "Marcus." Her voice trembled. "I've been dead since October 17th, 1989. The footsteps stopped just outside the room, and the doorknob slowly began to turn. The doorknob turned slowly, once, twice, then stopped. The room fell completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Evelyn's grip tightened around my arm. "Don't look into its face," she whispered. The old wooden door creaked open by a few inches. Darkness filled the gap. Not normal darkness. A thick black void. As if there was no hallway outside anymore. Only endless shadow. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. My breath became visible. Then a hand appeared. Long, black, thin as a dead branch. Its fingers wrapped around the edge of the door. Another hand followed. Then the door slowly opened wider. The thing stepped inside. My flashlight slipped from my hand. The beam rolled across the floor and illuminated the figure. It was taller than before. Much taller. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its body seemed to shift constantly, like smoke trapped inside a human shape. Where its face should have been was nothing but darkness. An empty hole that seemed deeper than the room itself. The creature tilted its head, and then it spoke, not with its own voice, with mine. "Marcus." I felt every hair on my body stand up. Then it spoke again, this time using my mother's voice, then my father's, then dozens of unfamiliar voices, one after another, as if hundreds of people were trapped inside it. Evelyn stepped in front of me. The creature immediately focused on her. For the first time, it seemed angry. The shadows around its body twisted violently. "You should have stayed dead," it growled. The entire church shook. Wood cracked somewhere below. Windows rattled. Evelyn looked back at me. There were tears in her eyes. "Listen carefully." "What?" "When it trapped the town, it fed on fear." The creature moved closer. The floorboards bent beneath its weight. Evelyn continued, "But it can only keep control if people surrender to it." I didn't understand. Then she pointed toward the old oil lamp. The light. The creature suddenly lunged. Evelyn shoved me sideways. Its black arm missed my head by inches and smashed through the wall behind me. Wood exploded everywhere. I grabbed the lamp. The flame flickered wildly. The creature screamed, a horrible, inhuman sound. For the first time, it backed away. The light was hurting it. "Marcus!" Evelyn shouted. "Now!" I hurled the lamp directly at the creature. The glass shattered. Flames erupted across its body. The room exploded with blinding light. The entity let out a scream so loud it felt like my skull would crack apart. The darkness around it began collapsing. The walls trembled. The floor split open. Every name carved into the church walls started glowing. Hundreds, thousands, voices filled the room. The trapped souls of Black Hollow. The creature stumbled backward, its body breaking apart into streams of black smoke. Then the entire church shook with one final violent impact, and everything went white. I kept driving without looking in the mirror again. The highway stretched endlessly through the darkness. No cars, no trucks, no lights, just me, and the road. For nearly 20 minutes nothing happened. The silence felt wrong. After everything I had seen that night, silence was somehow more frightening than screams. My eyes kept scanning the road ahead. Then something caught my attention. A road sign. It stood on the right side of the highway. Old, rust-covered, barely visible through the fog. As my headlights swept across it, I felt my stomach tighten. The sign read, "Welcome to Ravens Creek." I frowned. That wasn't possible. Ravens Creek was the town I had left behind hours ago. I was supposed to be heading east. There was no way I should be anywhere near that place. Maybe it was another town with a similar name. Maybe I was tired. Maybe my mind was still affected by everything that had happened. I kept driving. A few minutes later, another sign appeared. This one was newer, cleaner, and impossible to ignore. Ravens Creek 1 mile. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. A cold feeling spread through my chest. No, 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 no. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The truck growled and surged forward. I wanted distance. I wanted daylight. I wanted this nightmare to end. Then the radio turned on by itself. A burst of static exploded through the cab. I nearly jumped. The radio hadn't worked in years. Yet now the speaker crackled with life. Static. Buzzing. Then a voice. A weak female voice. Don't stop. My heart nearly stopped. It was the same voice. The woman from the gas station. The woman who had warned me. The woman who shouldn't have existed. The speaker crackled again. Keep driving. Then silence. The radio died. And at that exact moment something stepped onto the road ahead. I slammed the brakes. The truck screeched violently. The figure stood motionless in the headlights. A little girl, about 8 years old, wearing a white dress, barefoot, her head hanging low. She wasn't moving. She wasn't blinking. She was simply standing there, blocking the road. And deep inside I knew one thing. If I got out of that truck, I wasn't coming back. The little girl stood in the middle of the highway. Her head remained lowered. The truck's headlights illuminated her pale dress. For several seconds neither of us moved. Then she slowly raised her head. My blood turned to ice. There was no face, only darkness. A black hollow void where her face should have been. I immediately remembered the woman's warning. Don't stop. My foot came off the brake. The engine roared. The truck began moving again. The girl remained standing there. Closer, closer, closer. Then she suddenly vanished. Not stepped away. Not ran. Vanished. As if she had never existed. The road ahead was empty. I drove faster. The speedometer climbed higher than I normally dared at night. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to escape. Suddenly the fog began thinning. The dark forest on both sides slowly disappeared. The sky ahead grew lighter. The first signs of dawn appeared on the horizon. For the first time all night, hope returned. Then I saw the final road sign. You are now leaving Ravens Creek. My heart nearly stopped. Leaving? I had never entered. At least I thought I hadn't. The sign disappeared behind me, and instantly everything changed. The air felt warmer. The pressure inside the cab vanished. The strange feeling that something was watching me disappeared. It was over. At least that's what I believed. An hour later, I reached a truck stop packed with drivers. Bright lights. People talking. Coffee machines humming. Normal life. I had never been happier to see ordinary people. I parked the truck and stepped out. An old driver sitting near the entrance noticed how shaken I looked. He asked if I was alright. For some reason I told him everything. The gas station. The woman. The town. The shadows. The girl on the highway. When I finished speaking, the old man's face had gone completely pale. He slowly stood up. Then he asked one question. What did you say the town was called? Ravens Creek. The old man stared at me. Then he whispered, That's impossible. I frowned. What do you mean? He swallowed hard, then pointed toward a newspaper clipping hanging on the wall. I walked over and froze. The headline read, Ravens Creek destroyed by fire -1978. My hands began shaking. The article explained that decades earlier an unexplained fire had wiped out the entire town. Hundreds of residents died. The town was abandoned. The roads leading to it were permanently closed. Nobody had lived there since. I couldn't breathe, because I had driven through Ravens Creek. Last night, the old driver looked at me and quietly said, Son, if what you're saying is true, then you didn't drive through a town. You drove through its ghosts. I never returned to that highway again, and I never saw that woman again. But sometimes late at night, when the road is empty and the fog becomes thick, my truck radio still turns on by itself, and a familiar voice whispers only 3 words, Keep driving, Daniel. And before I end this story, if you or someone you know has experienced something truly strange, unexplained, paranormal, or terrifying, feel free to share it with me. Who knows, your story might be featured in one of my upcoming videos. Until then, stay safe, keep the lights on, and remember, some roads are never meant to be traveled after dark.